Good evening. I'm Judy Clem on behalf of the Friends of the Oak Park Conservatory. We are delighted to host this evening's lecture, Mysterious Moths. The Friends of the Oak Park Conservatory offer volunteer opportunities, special events, education programming, and along with fundraising support for the 95, almost 100-year-old Oak Park Conservatory. And as part of our mission, we really want to educate and inspire our gardeners to become more confident in their endeavors. And so we want to continue to offer lectures like this. So tonight's lecture is featuring Chelsea Gottfried, and she'll be talking to us about mysterious moths. So I'm excited to introduce her in a minute. I do want to mention that our upcoming lecture in October, November is, I don't mean to scare you guys, but we do have a houseplant pest management lecture for December. Also coming up at the conservatory, we do have our fall mum and bulb sale is currently going on that the Park District runs. And so you can come by anytime to the conservatory and shop for a variety of bulbs. And there's some beautiful hardy mums still available to brighten up your front porch and your garden. In December, the Park District runs a winter greens market. So that is a super festive holiday market. So note that on your calendar. And I also want to put a plug in for those of us who are chomping at the bit to get into our gardens in January. We do have a seed swap and seed starting winter sowing lecture that we will be doing. And we'll feature the full gamut of seeds from veggies, annuals, perennials, natives, etc. So we're excited about that. And of course, we have our membership available. So if you want to learn more about our membership, please visit our website, fopcon.org, FOPCON.org. And at this time, I'd like to introduce our friends from West Cook Wild Ones. I'm super delighted to be co-presenting tonight with Adrienne Fisher and Laura Hartwell Berlin are here from West Cook Wild Ones. So Adrienne, take it away.
Oh, hi there. Yeah, I'm a co-chair of programs and advocacy for West Cook Wild Ones, and some of you have probably seen Laura and me when we do our monthly presentations. Wild Ones is a native landscaping organization specifically to promote natives. Our mission statement is that Wild Ones promotes native landscapes through education, advocacy, and collaborative action, like we are doing tonight. We're all gardeners together, and we say, more natives, please. We do a lot of work here in West Cook, not just Oak Park, but also Forest Park, Berwyn, Westchester, Riverside. All throughout, we have members who are very interested in either adding native plants to their gardens or going full native, which quite a few people are doing these days. Next, Judy. We invite everybody to consider joining the movement. We are a member-based chapter of the National Wild Ones organization, but we do everything locally to benefit people in Cook County. We offer monthly programs, plant sales, native garden tour every summer, often in different suburbs, community projects. We have a grant program. We have been able to help foster native plant gardens throughout Cook County. It's really quite remarkable. And we have plenty of volunteer opportunities, especially for our native plant sale that we have every spring and pick up in June, and it's huge. We partner with the forest preserves, and a lot of people in Oak Park have the plants we've sold in their gardens. Anyway, so I'm really looking forward to seeing this talk about moths, and I know Laura is too. We are a big fan of learning what to plant in our gardens so that we can help these nocturnal visitors live and have great habitat. All right.
Great. Thank you so much. So, Chelsea, would you mind sharing your screen and then I'll do your intro and you can just roll right into your presentation? Perfect. Okay. So let me introduce Chelsea and then you can take it away. It is my pleasure to introduce our special guest this evening. Chelsea Gottfried is a naturalist from Crawford County, Ohio. In 2020, she founded Forest Friends, a nature-based preschool where children learn and explore in nature. An avid native plant gardener and passionate entomologist, Chelsea's areas of expertise include moths, bees, dragonflies, and damselflies. She enjoys capturing up-close images of insects and flowers using macro photography. Her first book, Gardening for Moths, a regional guide, which she co-authored with Jim McCormick, was released in 2023 and features many of her photographs. I also want to mention that you can post any questions in our chat tonight, and Casey Nikoloff, one of our volunteers with the Friends of the Oak Park Conservatory, will manage our chat and we'll do Q&A after Chelsea's lecture. So without further ado, take it away. Let's see. I would like to, hold on one second. Let me spotlight you. Let's see.
Thank you so much for inviting me to do this, Judy, and thank you all for joining us tonight. I'll just keep talking until you can see me.
Okay, hold on one second. Let me see. I just want to make sure we can see your, sorry guys.
Oh, there
Just
we
give me
go.
1 second.
I think you got it.
I can see you, but I don't know that I can see the presentation screen. So just give me a second.
Okay. Well, while you're figuring that out, if Casey, if you could, so my presentation is a little bit interactive. So if everyone wants to just feel free to use the chat box. And Casey, if you could maybe read those out to me as they're coming in, I would really appreciate that since I can't see it.
Perfect.
Does that sound great? All right.
Definitely.
Is it working yet?
Yeah.
I can see your screen, Chelsea.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're good now? We're good now, yes. Awesome. Okay. All right, so mysterious moths. You may have been wondering, like, what's so special about moths when you saw the advertisement for this presentation. So before we get started, I want you to kind of maybe close your eyes or just think about, there we go. What pops into your mind when you hear the word moth? What do you think about? So maybe a picture or maybe some words. If you want to share, feel free to type what you're picturing or thinking about in the chat box. What do you think of when you hear the word moth? What comes to mind? Anybody sharing, or are we keeping them private? Maybe I
Holes
can
in my
see.
sweaters is one of the responses. I'm also seeing butterflies, dark colors, evenings and nights, fuzzy flyers around lights, nighttime butterflies.
Okay, so I heard some pests, nighttime butterflies. I like that. We're going to talk about that. So a lot of people, when they think of moths, they think of pests or they think of moths that look like this. And in the birding world, they're called little brown jobs. And we have lots of little brown jobs in the moth world too. Often, if you're walking home at night and you're by some lights, they might be flying around you and you think they're trying to get you, but they're not, I promise. They're just attracted to the lights. But hopefully I can convince you tonight that there are more than just little brown jobs in the moth world. Moths are really cool and they can be very beautiful too. So if you go to your local bookstore or you do a quick search online, you'll see lots of books about gardening for butterflies. And understandably so, butterflies are very pretty. They are out during the day. They're not night butterflies, so we get to see them. And even bees and birds people are gardening for now. But hopefully in this talk tonight, I'm going to convince you that moths are way more important than butterflies. So my co-author, Jim McCormick, if you're not familiar with him, he's a retired botanist from the Division of Wildlife here in Ohio. And he had this great idea, like, hey, we need to start promoting moths because they're so important. So he thought gardening for moths would be a perfect new unique book for gardeners because it really isn't out there yet. And in case you're wondering, our ecoregion that we created does include Illinois. I don't know if there's anyone out there from Indiana, but all of Illinois, all of Indiana, and southern Wisconsin and Michigan. So pretty much the whole Midwest, but then there are some other parts too. So everything in our book would apply to where you guys are. Butterflies are beautiful. I won't argue with that. But the title for the world's most beautiful insect, any guesses who it belongs to? Who do you think the world's most beautiful insect is? I think I can look at the chat, maybe. Maybe not. No, I can't see the chat.
We have a couple of guesses. Luna moth, dragonfly, another
Oh,
dragonfly.
I can see it now. Dragonflies are really pretty. Anyone here just finished Doug Tellemy's? I signed up for that and then I realized this was pretty much the same time, so I couldn't. But I will talk about Doug in this talk, so. And I'm excited to see the recording of that. So I saw a beetle too. So I am talking about moths tonight. So the world's most beautiful insect is a moth. So this is a very butterfly-ish looking moth, but this is the Madagascan sunset moth. Then we have a lot of other very pretty moths in the Midwest area. Hopefully you're all familiar with the Luna moth. This is a blinded sphinx, and then this is an Io moth. The rosy maple moth is one of my favorites with its pink and yellow. This is the herald, and this is the angel. Then we have moths like the tufted bird dropping moth. It's like, who's gonna love this one, you know? It looks like a pile of bird poop sitting on a leaf when you look at it from far away. Not too exciting, but if you look at the same moth up close, it looks a lot different. So this is that same tufted bird dropping moth. And you can see it's very colorful and it has some really cool textures and patterns if you look at it up close. So hopefully I've convinced you that moths are beautiful too. I think they're just as beautiful as butterflies are. All right, here's another interactive part. How many species of butterflies do you think have been recorded in Illinois? So how many species of butterflies do you guys have? Any guesses? So I see 200, 300, 900. Any other guesses? So 150 species in Illinois. Now, how many species of moths do you think you guys have? I see 9 times as many as butterflies, 500, 2,000 plus. I think Nature Nerd has got it. So yes, over 2,000 species have been recorded in Illinois so far. And I'm going to take a little break from my presentation, maybe. Maybe I can't do that since I'm screen sharing. Well, if you get a chance, if you have ever heard of iNaturalist, it's a website or it's an app on your phone. And iNaturalist actually has a project called the Moths of Illinois on it. You can actually get on there and see how many species have been recorded, how like the number of observations of each species, so you can see which species are the most common in your state. It's a really good source of data. I was going to show you, but I can't leave this for some reason. All right, so this is, I know it looks really fancy and scientific, but really all I want you to look at is this pink rectangle. But this is a phylogenetic tree of the insect order Lepidoptera. which includes butterflies and moths. And if you look at this pink rectangle, this is the family of butterflies, and it's kind of nestled right in amongst all of the moth families. So you can see that really butterflies are moths. We like to distinguish them and categorize things as humans, but and Jim and I thought that entomologist Akito Kawahara summed it up best when he says, the bottom line is all butterflies are moths, and there's no such thing as butterflies. Which, I mean, if you look at this, it's pretty much true. Genetically, they're all related and all kind of nestled in within each other, if that makes sense. But if you don't believe me, we're going to take a little quiz. So I'm going to show you a picture, and I want you to say whether you think it's a butterfly or a moth. So what do you think about this guy? Is it a butterfly or a moth? See if we can see the chat again. So I see moth, moth, moth. Moth. I can't trick you guys. Yeah, this is a moth. This is the 8-spotted forester moth. What about this one? Butterfly or moth? Oh, you guys are good. You guys know your insects. I think I got one moth, but yes, this is a butterfly. So this is a butterfly and the skipper. What's one of the butterflies known as skippers? And a lot of people confuse these as moths because they're pretty small. They're usually very drably colored, and they're often very fuzzy. So when they see them flying around, they think they're little moths. But this is a swarthy skipper. Good work. All right, next one. When I'm pulling down the chat box, can you guys see that or not?
No, we cannot.
Okay, awesome. I didn't want that to be distracting. I saw someone put butterfly and then no in parentheses. Oh, this one's a little bit trickier. So it looks like a mixed guesses here. Half of you think moth, half of you think butterfly. So this one is question marks. I like it. So this one is a moth. So usually moths don't fold their wings together like that. Usually butterflies do that. But this is a moth. The way you can tell of the difference, pretty much the only solid way you can tell is if you look at their antennae. Moths will either have super feathery, like plumose antennae, or they will have these really straight antennae. And if this was a butterfly, it would have something on the end here, like a little knob or like a club tip. And since these are just straight out, we know that it's a moth. So now that you know that, hopefully you can get the rest of them right. So what do you guys think? Well, this one is a little bit tricky because you can't see his antennae. What do you think about this one, butterfly or moth? I see moth, moth. Oh, someone's using some context clues. But not all moths are nocturnal, and not all butterflies are diurnal. So we can't always rely on the time of day. So I see a couple butterflies, a couple moths. This is a moth. So this is the bluish spring moth. But it looks a lot like this guy, which is a spring azure butterfly. So if you look at the antennae, sorry, I'm getting impatient. But if you look at the antennae, oh, sorry, it has like a little kind of club tip. So that's how you can tell that one's a butterfly. But yes, they are very similar looking if you look at both of them. All right, what about this one? I won't be impatient for this one. I'll let you guys answer. Oh, good job, guys. You were listening. So yes, it's definitely a moth because it has those plumose antennae, or these ones would be called bipectinate. This is an orange wing. It is actually a specialist of honey locust. So if you have honey locust trees, you probably have seen these before. They're pretty common. I don't know why that's not working. All right, last one. What do you guys think about this one? Butterfly or moth or wasp? Maybe I'm tricking you. I say moth, moth, moth. Ooh, Katie, you're good. Oh, it does look a lot like a wasp. So these are small clear wing moths, and they are wasp mimics. And they're actually, most of them are diurnal too. So you'll see them out flying during the day, nectaring at flowers. But they are moths. If you look at their antennae, you see that they're just straight out. Good work, guys. You are probably the smartest group I've ever had with those. All right, so why moths? Hopefully I've convinced you that moths are beautiful, but they're more than just eye candy. So we're going to talk about the important roles that they play in our ecosystems. So what are all of these moths doing? Katie's on the ball. So yes, they're nectaring. They don't care if they're pollinators or not. But yes, when they visit flowers and access the nectar, then they act as pollinators. So yes, moths are pollinators, and that is one of their important functions in our ecosystems. So a lot of times when we think of pollinators, we think of bees. And bees are really important pollinators, and bees have been studied a lot because they're out flying during the day. Moths are just beginning to be studied as far as how important they are as pollinators. There was a recent study done out of the University of Sussex in England, and they studied the pollinators that were visiting wild blackberry flowers. And they found that even though the bees were more frequent visitors, the moths actually were more effective at pollinating, and were able to pollinate more of the flowers than the bees were. So I think as more and more studies are done, we're gonna find out, and we already know that moths are important pollinators, but we're gonna realize how important they really are. They also have an excellent sense of smell, so they can detect chemicals from the plants or the flowers from really far away, as well as pheromones from their mates. If there's anything that pops up in the chat that needs sharing, just shout it out, because I'm not gonna take the time to keep looking at it because I have to pull it all the way down. If you don't believe me, go out at night and take a flashlight. Look at your flowers. Common milkweed is an awesome one. I know it's done blooming for the year, but if you take a flashlight out at night and look at your common milkweed or native sunflowers this time of year are really great. Goldenrod, the moths will be all over it. So in Illinois, you guys have a lot of native orchids. Hopefully you know about some of them. You have around 50 species, I think, of native orchids. This is one that is endangered in your state. So this is the Eastern Prairie Fringed Orchid. It's listed as threatened federally. It's a really cool orchid. It's very, very showy, very pretty. But my co-author, Jim, was kind of assuming that they were pollinated by moths. Moths are responsible for pollinating a lot of our native orchids. And sometimes they have really special relationships with those orchids. But he was curious, okay, what was pollinating this one? So he went out to a stand of these at night and set up his camera and found this Carolina sphinx moth that was coming in and nectaring from this. And so what happens with many of these orchids is they have pollinia, they're called, and it's kind of like a package of pollen. And that pollen either will get stuck to the proboscis, which you can see is the moth's long tongue, just like a butterfly has. Or sometimes in some orchids, they'll get stuck to their eyeball. They might get stuck to their face someplace. And then when they fly to another flower, that pollen sac will become detached, and then that's how the orchid gets pollinated. So So pretty cool moth, I think. This is a Carolina sphinx moth. Sphinx moths in general, there's quite a few species, but they can fly super fast. They can fly over 30 miles per hour. They're the second fastest insect after dragonflies. This one has some showy orange spots along its abdomen. That's where it gets its scientific name. But hopefully we can all get on board and agree that this is a pretty cool moth. But then if you tell people, okay, this is its baby, then sometimes I get some gasps or like looks of horror because if you have ever had a vegetable garden, these guys are usually not your friends. We consider them to be pests most of the time. So this is the tobacco hornworm. A lot of people call them tomato worms, but the true name is tobacco hornworm. And they will eat any plant in the nightshade family. So your tomatoes, your peppers, potatoes, eggplants. Um, so the reason I'm sharing this is kind of keep in mind, sometimes things that we consider to be pests can still perform important roles in our ecosystems, like pollinated endangered orchids. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're trying to deal with pests or trying to get rid of them. And here in a little bit, we're going to talk about kind of how Mother Nature will do that for you if you just let them go. So why moths? Moths are even more than just beautiful pollinators. So here we have a gray tree frog, an eastern red bat, a southern flying squirrel, and a red-eyed vireo. So why do you guys think I'm going to talk about these and to talk about moths? If you were just at Doug's talk, you probably already know. So that's awesome. What do these guys have to do with moths? All right, I'm going to take a look at the chat box. Oh yeah, we're going to talk about those wasps getting the caterpillars here in a couple minutes. All eat cats, food source, moths are their food. You guys are good. So moths are food, and that is their most important role in our ecosystem. So yes, they pollinate, and sometimes they're the only pollinators of some of our orchids, but their most important role is that they are food for a lot of other animals. So I think this statement is so profound, and this came from Doug telling me in his research. But moths and their caterpillars are responsible for transferring more energy from plants to animals than all other herbivores combined. So that just blows my mind. It's just crazy to me. Like there are so many herbivores out there, and I mean, you think moths and caterpillars are small, but there are so many of them. Remember that you guys have over 2,000 species in your state. So that's just, they far outnumber butterflies. There are a lot of them. So in North America, there are 310 bird species that depend on caterpillars for part of their diet. Here you can see a song sparrow with a beak full of caterpillars. And then some of our songbirds, even as adults, the caterpillars are a majority of their diet. So the Tennessee warbler, the rose-breasted grosbeak, and then that red-eyed vireo I showed you a few slides ago. They rely heavily on caterpillars. So a lot of times we think of birds as eating worms. We've got that phrase, the early bird gets the worm. And we think birds are out there hunting worms all day. Well, that is not true. Most of our birds are out there looking for caterpillars or grasshoppers or spiders or other insects. There are some that will go out looking for worms like robins and starlings, but most of the time they're not out there eating worms all the time. So the worm-eating warbler should really be called the caterpillar-eating warbler. Why caterpillars, you might be wondering? Well, they are highly nutritious. They're high in protein, they're high in fat, they're easy to digest. They're pretty much like little sausages. So, but nutritious sausages. So think of like a spinach broccoli filled sausage. My co-author, Jim, he likes to compare them to hot dogs. And so, of course, he had to put our biggest species of caterpillar in a hot dog bun just to show how big it really is. Because he says that, oh, it's the size of a hot dog, and nobody believes him. So here you can see it's true. And this one wasn't even full grown. It still had another week of eating and growing after this. So if you're familiar with Doug Tallamy and his research at all, he and his colleagues have figured out that it takes over 6,000 caterpillars to raise a nest of bluebird chicks to fledgling age. Here you can see one with, it looks like 2 caterpillars in its beak. And Jim took this photo. All the bird photos are his. That is a lot of caterpillars for one nest of bluebird chicks. So I didn't have access to the Illinois Breeding Bird Atlas, so I had to kind of keep these numbers for Ohio. But I'm sure that the numbers in Illinois are pretty comparable, or Indiana, or whatever state you're in. But here in Ohio, according to our Breeding Bird Atlas, we have around 200,000 pairs of eastern bluebirds nesting. And so I did a little bit of mathing, and I figured out that that equaled about 1,200,000,000 caterpillars. And that's just for bluebirds, just for one clutch, and just in Ohio. So if you can extrapolate to all the songbirds that are feeding caterpillars to their chicks in all of the states, and sometimes like with bluebirds, they usually have 2 clutches a year. So that's a lot of caterpillars these birds are needing. And so we really have to help them, help provide them those caterpillars. There are also a lot of insects that depend on caterpillars as part of their diet. So a lot of times when we hear the word wasp, we cringe or we think, oh, they're out to get us. But most wasps are social, or most wasps are not social species like the yellow jackets, and even like the paper wasps or the bald-faced hornets. Most wasps are solitary species. So most of our species are solitary. They're out just doing their own thing. They don't want anything to do with you. They're not going to sting you. So here are 2 examples of those. And these are mama wasps. So most adult wasps just drink nectar. They're not eating anything. But their larvae need meat to survive. So these mama wasps, what they have done is they have stung the caterpillars, and that paralyzes the caterpillar, but it doesn't kill them. And so then they drag the caterpillar back to this burrow they've made or created someplace. And then they lay an egg on it. And then when their egg hatches, the wasp larva will consume the caterpillar, and the caterpillar is still fresh for it since it's only paralyzed and not dead, and it's not decomposing. So they're just mama wasps out there trying to do good. I saw we have a chat, so I have to see. Oh, I thought it was going to be about wasps, but it wasn't. All right. So hopefully I've convinced you that not all wasps are bad. And then there's these really cool braconid wasps. This genus is that does this, the caterpillar zombifying is in the genus Glyptopanthes. We just found this one this year at Mothapalooza, so I was super excited because I had never seen it before. But what happens here is the mama wasp will inject her eggs into the caterpillar. Her eggs will hatch, and then the wasp larvae will eat the inside of the caterpillar, but it'll kind of, they'll avoid its vital organs so that it still stays alive, it doesn't die. And then the wasp larvae, when they're done growing and developing and they're ready to pupate, they will chew their way through the caterpillar skin. And then they will make little cocoons around themselves. So you can't see them because they have actually mind controlled this caterpillar. And instead of the caterpillar spinning its own cocoon around itself, it has spun a cocoon around the little wasp cocoons. And then if that wasn't enough, the caterpillar, they somehow control the caterpillar, and it will sit atop this cocoon it has constructed for these guys and act as its bodyguard. So we're going to see a video of that here, hopefully. So it's kind of thrashing around, scaring the ant away. Or if you walk up to it and you give it a little squeeze, it'll do the same thing. So it protects that cocoon with the pupating wasps from being eaten by something else. So caterpillar zombified bodyguards, pretty cool. So if you're thinking this all sounds like a lot of doom and gloom for caterpillars, you're right. Most caterpillars do not get to be moths. Here we have that tobacco hornworm again. These are both tobacco hornworms. You can see this one's probably 1 or 2 weeks old. But most of these guys are not going to be able to grow big enough to be as big as this one. Most of them are going to get eaten or parasitized. So if you're a caterpillar, not a great life. You're probably going to get eaten. But that is good because that is what we need them for in our ecosystems. So we're going to kind of circle back to that tobacco hornworm. If you've ever had these in your garden, it's really important that you just leave them. Mother Nature has, natural predators for them. So this is a different type of braconid wasp. The ones that specialize on the tobacco hornworms are called Cotesia congregata. But their story is a little bit different. So instead of kind of mind controlling the caterpillar, they just chew their way out of the caterpillar and then they spin their little cocoons right on the caterpillar. So if you've ever seen these are not wasp eggs, they're actually the wasp cocoons, and the adult wasps will emerge from them. All right, next we're going to talk about some predators of adult moths. So caterpillars are super important. They're probably the most important, but even if the caterpillar is lucky enough to become an adult, it's still, there's still things that want to eat it. And one of them is this bolus spider. So they're one of my favorites. This is a toad-like bolus spider. She kind of looks like a moldy potato. But during the day, they rest on a leaf. So they're kind of looking like a shiny bird dropping. But then at night, they kind of get to work. So even though these guys these girls, I should say, this is a female, she is an orb weaver spider. She does not spin this elaborate web at night. Instead, well, first let me tell you, so with a big spider web like we're used to seeing, kind of like in Charlotte's Web, moths usually don't, not always, but usually they can escape from them because their scales will just kind of slough off and they'll be able to fly away. So what the bolus spider has done is it has adapted to pretty much like actively hunting these moths. So what she does instead of spinning this web is she will drop down from a line of silk at night. And then she'll lower this line of silk with a super sticky droplet of silk on the end. And this silk is specialized to be able to get past those scales and actually stick to the moth's wing, and so that they can't escape. But what she does is to get the moths to come to her is she will emit these pseudo pheromones that mimic the pheromones of female moth species. And then the male moths will smell those and they will fly in thinking that they're going to find a mate. And instead, she gets him with that drop of silk and reels him in, and she bites him and does her spidery thing. I think it's pretty cool. Not fun for the male moth, but. Then we have what we call zombie fungi. So if you've ever seen the show The Last of Us, this was their inspiration. There's several species of fungi in the genus Cordyceps and Ophiocordyceps that will infect insects and spiders. But you can see this moth has been infected by one. So what happens is the spores will fall down onto an insect. And then the hyphae are kind of like the root system of the fungi, will eat and grow within the insect, but will keep it alive, kind of like those wasps did. And then they kind of wrap around the muscles of the insect and can control their movement. So they can control the insect and make it go someplace up high before they finally take over or kill the insect. And then they do their fruiting. So these would be kind of like the mushrooms. And these are what the spores are coming out of. So being up in the higher place, when the spores finally come out, they can infect more insects. They'll have a higher likelihood of infecting more. And they'll even like control kind of the time of day or the humidity too. So like they'll choose like the ideal conditions before they make the insect go up, which is pretty cool. Right, we also have eastern whippoorwills that moths are a majority of their diet. I I don't know what your populations are like out there, but where I live in Ohio, I'm kind of in north central Ohio, and we don't have any anymore. I never hear them up here, but we still do have some in southern Ohio. So they really like heavily forested areas that have high insect densities. If you're looking at this guy, you might be thinking, like, look at his tiny little beak. How is he eating big moths? And these guys are active kind of when bats are at dusk. That's when they're doing their hunting. But if we see this video, you can see how big their mouths actually are. So they're also called, and a nickname is frog mouth. So they have these huge mouths. They're just all feathered, so we can't tell how big they are. But they are, yeah, they love to eat moths and beetles. Well, and my slide isn't advancing. I'm gonna try down here. There we go. All right, so the biggest predator of adult moths, though, are bats. So a lot of times we think of bats eating mosquitoes, and they do eat mosquitoes. But if you were a bat, would you want to have this wispy little mosquito, or do you want to have a big chunky moth? Hopefully you would all want to have a big chunky moth. Sorry, I was just catching up on the chat box a little bit. So we're going to talk about some of the adaptations or the ways that moths have evolved to avoid getting eaten by bats. So the first strategy is to just nosedive to the ground. And the way that these moths do this is that they have evolved ears, and they can actually hear the bats echolocating. So when they can hear the bats echolocation calls getting really close and really they start like doing them really close together when they are getting close, they will just nosedive to the ground and avoid getting eaten by the bats. The second strategy is some moths, like this giant leopard moth, and the rest of our tiger moths, they can not only hear the bats echolocating, but they can communicate back to the bats. So they can put out their own ultrasonic signals and tell the bat that they are toxic and that, hey, you probably don't want to eat me. I don't taste good. And they actually are toxic. So, but the giant leopard moth is really cool because it has another defense, and it's called reflex bleeding. So if you can see these golden droplets on the sides of its head here. So if a moth is kind of like squeezed, maybe by a bird or something during the day, it will secrete these. And I think in one of the moth guides I was reading, it said that they're presumed to be bitter tasting. And so a couple years ago at Mothapalooza, one of these giant leopard moths was on the ground. And so I was like carefully picking it up and trying to move it out of the way so it wouldn't get stepped on. And it did this reflex bleeding in my hand. So after I put the moth down, I'm kind of looking at my hand and I'm thinking, I wonder if it really is bitter. And so I gave it a little taste, and it did not taste good. It was pretty bad, but it was like nothing I've ever tasted before. So, but it didn't make me sick or anything. So it was all for science. All right, strategy number 3. So these guys are pretty cool. They're not this big in real life. They're about an inch long, maybe. This is the American ermine moth, and they are mimics of the tiger moths that we just talked about. So even though they aren't toxic and they wouldn't taste bad, they'd be a tasty snack for the bat. They will put off signals to tell the bat that they taste bad, even though they don't. So that's called Batesian mimicry. I'm going to start going a little bit faster because I see we're getting low on time. I think I talk more when I'm on virtual than in person. All right, strategy number 4. This is a Grote's Bertholdia moth. We don't have these in the Midwest. They're found out in the Western US, but they're the only animal known to science that can jam the sonar of bats or jam the sonar of their predator. So what happens is when the bats start getting close and their signals increase in frequency, these guys can put signals back at them so quickly that the bat signals bounce off of their signals and the bat can't find them. And then if you're a Luna moth, you grow tails. So for a while, scientists, researchers thought that their kind of elongate hind wings were disruptive camouflage to help them blend in during the day with plant matter. But recently they figured out that when Luna moths and other moths that have these tails are flying, they kind of twirl in the air. And what that does, it's called an acoustic distraction. So the bat will focus its calls on those tails and will attack those tails instead of the body of the moth. So then the moth can escape and reproduce, hopefully. And then the last one is my favorite. So some moths are very furry. It's not really fur, it's just modified scales. But for a while we thought, okay, like, yeah, they're nocturnal and it's cold at night, so they need to stay a little bit warmer. But it didn't really make sense because there are a lot of species in the rainforest and tropical areas that are really furry like this too. So finally, they figured out that the furrier you are as a moth, the more of the bat's ultrasonic signals you will absorb into your scales. So they're not bouncing back to the bat, so that it makes it harder for the bat to find you. So if you're a furry moth like this dot-lined white, you're like 85% less likely to get eaten by a bat. All right, so moths are pretty. Hopefully I convinced you of that. They are important pollinators, especially for our native orchids. And they are food for a lot of animals, even more. I couldn't even share everything. They're food for way more animals than even what I talked about. So how do we help them? We're going to think about the monarch, since hopefully I'm sure you're all familiar with the monarch. So if we want to plant for monarchs, what are some things that we should plant in our gardens? Milkweed, yep. So milkweed is their host plant. So that's what their caterpillars are eating. Late blooming natives, yep. So flowers that bloom in the fall are super important for the migrating monarchs. Yep, so we want to think about, you guys got it. We want to think about nectar plants and we want to think about host plants. Okay, so same is true for moths pretty much. So let's talk about some moth nectar plants. Usually pale or white flowers are what they're going to go after, especially our nocturnal species because they can see them more easily. And think about flowers that the scent becomes stronger at night. I think even milkweed does that. If you've ever gone out at night, milkweed is just so strong at night. And then think about the shape of the flower. So remember, the moths have that long proboscis, that long tongue. They can access nectar in deeper flowers. And then here are some of my favorite nectar plants for moths. So milkweed, common milkweed is just huge. I always see so many moths on that. Buttonbush is a good one. Culver's root, which is on the cover of our book, and it's shown right here. Culver's root is a moth magnet. A couple that I just want to point out is boneset and mistflower. So boneset and mistflower are special because they have these chemicals called pyrrolizidine alkaloids. And some species will specifically collect those like to use as a defense. And then some male moths will collect them to use in their spermatophores and will give them like as nuptial gifts to their mate. And then their mate can use them to help defend their eggs or yeah, pretty much that to help defend themselves. So those are two really cool ones that you'll see certain species of moths on. Not all moths do that, but a few species do. All right, hopefully you all want to attract a Luna moth to your yard. So Luna moths are one of the moths, and most of our giant silk moths and some of our sphinx moths, they don't have mouth parts and they don't eat as adults. So you're not going to be attracting them with nectar plants. So for a lot of our showier species, you really have to think about their host plants. So luckily for us, lunas are polyphagous. They'll eat a wide variety of plants. Here we have sumac, cherry, sweet gum, tulip tree, spice bush, birch, hickory, maple, walnut. I think this is black gum and persimmon. I mostly find them on black walnut. So if you really want to attract them, plant black walnut. But all of these plants have something in common. Does anybody know what it is? And yes, they are all woody trees or shrubs, but that's not what I'm looking for here. I know you guys know because you were talking about it earlier. And hopefully there's a lot of Wild Ones members that have joined us tonight. Lots of native, yes. You guys got it. So these are all native. I think you guys are the first group that have ever answered that correctly. Good work. And you probably all know this already. If I can get my slide to go. But host plants are native plants because it requires years of evolving and adapting together for caterpillars to be able to process the chemicals in plants. Because plants don't want to be eaten. So they're always trying to come up with new chemicals and new ways of mixing things up so that animals aren't eating them. And the caterpillars have to be able to either sequester those chemicals or get rid of them. And that doesn't happen with plants that come from Europe or plants that come from Asia. They have to have our native plants here to be able to eat most of them. There are a few species that will eat anything, but that's pretty rare. There we go. If you're wondering if caterpillars are going to eat all of your plants, they're not. Remember, most of them get eaten themselves, and caterpillars can be pretty cute too. So this is a Promethea, and you can see he's got a smiley face. This is his rear end, this is his head. So pretty cute. If you've never been on the Native Plant Finder website, I really encourage you to use that. It was developed by Doug Tallamy's team and I think National Wildlife Federation, I believe, and NWF. But if you go to that website and you type in your zip code, it will give you these lists. So the number on the left tells you how many species of Lepidoptera they host in your area. So I did this for Columbus, but I checked it with a Chicago zip code, and the numbers were pretty close. And your plants are pretty similar out there. So oaks, of course, are the highest. They host almost 500 species of Lepidoptera. Trees in general are the best host. They're going to host more than our flowers and our grasses, but not all plants are created equal, like Doug says. So make sure if you want to do the most good, check which species are the best host when you're starting to add those natives in. Here are the top shrubs and bushes for growing moths. Of course, when I say roses, I mean our native roses, not like the hybrid tea roses and the pretty garden roses. And our top flowers and grasses for growing moths. So goldenrods are awesome. Our native sunflowers. This is a Maximilian sunflower, super cool. We have a lot of beautiful natives. Hibiscus, if you're not familiar with that, it's a perennial and it's native. So a lot of people ask me what my favorite moth is, and this is the wavy-lined emerald. So they're so cool because their caterpillars are the only caterpillar we know of that decorates itself with its food. So instead of eating leaves, they will eat the flower petals and the parts of the flowers. So if you haven't spotted this one yet, there's his head, and there's his rear end. There's his head. I'm going to go through these fast. I know I'm running out of time. Sorry. There's his head. So they can be different colors based on whatever plant they're feeding on. That's when I caught in the act of putting a purple coneflower seed on his back. So if you haven't ever seen one, they are usually on composite flowers in the aster family. I see them on black-eyed Susans all the time. Any Elytris they love. Those are what I see them on the most. I've seen them in the fall on white snake root though too, and I have seen them on hibiscus. But not all moths we can attract by planting the plants from those lists I showed you. So some moths, just like monarchs, are specialists. So you'll have to think about if you want to attract specific moths to your yard, exactly what their host plant is. So this is a gold moth and it will only eat, oh, wing stem. This is a moonseed moth and it will only eat moonseed. This is a primrose moth and, oh, sorry, and it will, of course, eat primrose. Jim got that nice picture. And then a lot of plants that we consider to be weedy, or we call them weeds, they're really good host plants. So one I want to point out really quickly is poison ivy. Poison ivy we think is a bad plant, and I get poison ivy. I've got it right now. I've been working on digging out the multiflora rose out of my woods. But poison ivy is native, and there are some specialists of poison ivy. So this is a beautiful Utilia, and its caterpillars only eat poison ivy. So if all of our poison ivy were gone, we wouldn't have the cool specialists either. One that I really want to emphasize is grape. Our native grapes and Virginia creeper are huge host plants for lots of species. So if you let grape grow, I'm not saying you should grow it in your flower beds, but if you are lucky enough to have some wild spaces in your yard where you can let it grow, please do. You might get an 8-spotted forester moth, you might get some Abbott sphinxes, you might get a grape leaf skeletonizer, you might get a Pandora sphinx, oh, sorry, a beautiful wood nymph, a grape root borer, a mournful thyrus, an Achaemen sphinx, a grape plume moth, a grape leaf folder, so many grapes, a polyphemus moth, a badwing, which I think is cuter from the front, a white-lined sphinx, a grapevine epimenis, Virginia creeper sphinx, or a Virginian tiger moth. So a lot of those moths are specialists of grape and Virginia creeper. They will only eat those and nothing else. Not all of them, but a lot of those were. If nothing else, just don't spray your lawn with herbicide, which I'm sure none of you guys do, but just letting things like dandelion, violets, plantain, dock, things like that grow, you'll get some of these really cool moths. And this one is what a woolly bear turns into. This is the Isabella tiger moth. What else can you do to help moths? Leave your leaves. Hopefully you've all heard of how important leaf litter is for all animals, but for moths, it's super important as shelter. So you can see these moths are camouflaged to rest on the dead leaves during the day. It's food for some moths. Some caterpillars don't eat live leaves, they only eat dead leaves. And then it's also a bed for cocoons. So moths like this Io moth, when they make their cocoons in the leaves, those cocoons will fall out this time of year. So if you're burning your leaves or mowing them up or removing them, then you're getting rid of those cocoons. So leaf litter is super important for all wildlife, but also for moths. Turn off your lights at night. So light pollution is a huge problem. Thankfully, I think people are starting to become aware of it. But you don't need to have lights on at night. We think that we need lights for safety as humans, but research has shown that lights or having a well-lit area will actually encourage criminals and encourage things like that to happen. So if you feel like you need to have a light for security, maybe put it on a motion sensor. That way it's not on all night long. They really they attract lots of insects, not just moths, but they confuse them. So a lot of times the moths will stay there all night. They'll lay their eggs there instead of laying them on the host plants, or they won't be mating and doing what they're normally supposed to be doing. So why care about moths? When you care about moths, you care about bolus spiders, you care about frogs, you care about bats, you care about flying squirrels and other squirrels too. You care about endangered orchids. You care about mama wasps and their babies. You care about whippoorwills and their relatives. You care about songbirds. You care about zombie fungi. And you care about kids and adults who enjoy the caterpillars and moths that you're helping to grow. So if you plant it, we will come. And I apologize for taking so long. And I even did my shorter one, but I think it just takes longer waiting for all of the responses. So if you need to leave, I understand. If you guys have questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you all again for joining us tonight. I'll take a look.
This is
Fantastic.
great. Casey, yeah, Casey, you want to ask Chelsea a couple of the questions? This was amazing. Go ahead,
Sure.
Casey.
Yeah, no, this was awesome. And as an insect nerd myself, I learned so much. My husband and I just saw a white-lined sphinx moth in our parking
Nice.
lot a couple of weeks ago. So we were geeking out about that. So this is very cool. There's just a few questions in the chat that you haven't covered because really you are so comprehensive. I think most of the things that popped up were already addressed, but there were a couple questions on feeding habits. And one of them, or one really was like an observation, noticing that moths seem to stay longer at flowers. If you could talk about that. And then again, are they feeding on nectar at night? And I think you addressed it just depends on the moth. It can be day or night.
Yeah, that is accurate. I've never really thought about that, but you're right. Moths do kind of hang out there. I'm not sure why. I don't know if they have a bigger storage area for the nectar. I'm kind of curious now because I have noticed that, but I never really thought about it. Because, yeah, I mean, butterflies, but also I wonder if like butterflies would hang out longer if we weren't disturbing them and getting close and making them fly away. I don't know if there's been any research on that, and I can't answer that. I don't know why moths hang out at flowers for longer. But yeah, that's a good observation, and I'm pretty curious if there's been any research done on that.
Yeah, interesting. Well, a good thesis project for somebody who wants to go to
Yeah.
grad school. Um, and then we had another question regarding moth activity. What do nocturnal moths do during the day?
So we do have some diurnal species of moths, like I said, but typically nocturnal moths, like if you think of the Luna moth, during the day they're just resting. So they're resting on the tree bark, they're resting on the ground someplace, they're just resting someplace that is hopefully a safe place for them. And they're hoping they're not going to get eaten by something. There are some moths that have certain defenses, and we talk about some of those in our book. If something does try to eat them during the day. But yeah, they're just resting. A lot of times people will find one of the giant silk moths during the day and think that they're injured because they're not moving around or flying. But that's normal behavior for them. They're just chilling out during the day and they're not active until night usually.
Makes sense. And then as we were talking about lights, we got a couple of questions about, how much impact will turning off your lights matter if there's bright street lights? And then another question, does UV light spectrum on lights matter?
Yes. So I think yellow lights are the best. Some moths are like when we purposefully put out bright lights and try to attract moths to be able to see what's in an area or get pictures of them. We put out UV lights too because some species are attracted to black lights. Um, so yes, definitely if you're thinking about replacing them, do your research. I know I just got Doug's new book. I forget. It's like I forget what it's called, but it's all the answers to all the questions he's ever gotten. And I know he addresses it in that, but I know that yellow light is recommended, especially over blue light. And like then the lesser lumens that you use obviously is better. So whatever you feel like you can get away with, but really I know one of the studies I heard about was actually done in Chicago, and they were trying to reduce the crime rates in alleys. And they thought, okay, let's just light them all up. Well, before they did that, they decided, okay, let's just do some of them and see what happens. Well, the alleys that they did light up, the crime actually increased. Um, so I know that's one study that's been done. I know there are others too, but and it's true. Like, I mean, if you're gonna do something, you don't want to do it. Nobody likes the dark. Um, Like I've gotten to the point where I'm not scared of it anymore, but I feel like it's just an innate human thing is to fear the dark, you know, and fear the unknown. Hopefully that answered that. Sorry.
No, that was great. Thank you. We've gotten a couple more questions, and I'll maybe just group a couple about antennae. Can moths manipulate their antennae, and also can they fold the feathery parts fore and aft?
So they can't actually move the parts of their antennae, but they can move the whole and like each one is called an antenna, plurals antennae. But yeah, they can fold them back. It's funny because I have different pictures of like the rosy maple moth, and each one looks so unique and individualized because I don't know. I feel like their faces are different. Yeah, the position of their antennae can change. You can tell when a moth is like trying to hide from the light if you're shining a light on it because it'll kind of be tucked in and its antennae will be tucked back. So yeah, definitely. Like you can see this one. This is a contracted Daytona down here, and you can see its antennae are completely folded down. But yeah, as far as these things, um, I should know the name of them. Sensili, maybe. They can't fold those back and forth, no.
Cool. Well, I will go ahead and pass it back to Judy here to wrap us up. Thank you so much.
Sure. Sure. Thank you,
So-
Casey. Special thanks to our friends at West Cook Wildlands for co-hosting with us tonight, and especially to Chelsea for tuning in from Ohio. This was amazing and dazzling. And I didn't get a chance to see Doug Tallamy's lecture prior to this, but I'm sure what a back-to-back duo for all of our native enthusiasts out there. So thank you so much for sharing your photo journey with us and introducing us to some friendly faces in the moth community. And if you guys want to learn more, just shout out to us. I'll send you a little survey to give us some feedback and ask for suggestions for future lectures. But thank you for being with us tonight, and have a good night, everyone.
Thanks again for
This
having
is
me.
wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much.